back down to our pump cover part here. Now, there are a few ways we can do things for HSM. One thing that I like to do is I like to show how to create stock externally of HSM, meaning that I'm going to create it as a separate solid body. I like to do it this way. It basically gives me a chance to visualize and see the stock itself. And the way I like to do that in a part environment is by adding a solid body to the part. Now, it's very simple to do, and going through this exercise, it's also going to help teach simple sketch functionality as well as constraining sketch functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the part over, and I know I'm going to machine this part one way or the other, and I know the dimensions of my stock that I need to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane on this face. Now, the plane tool, as I selected on it, is kind of intuitive. If I were to select, say, this cylinder and this face, then it knows that I want to create a tangent plane based to this face on that side, and I can flip it around and do different things. I'm going to re-click on that real quick, and if I just select this face, then it knows that I want to create a plane from that face. Now, you'll know if I hover over any other points, it's trying to match the plane type that I want to use. And what I mean by that is if I drop down the arrow underneath here, you have all of these plane types, but this is the general plane tool is estimating what I want to do based off of my selections here. What I want to actually do is leave it off of that face, but I'm going to left click, hold, and pull that up, and you can see is that pulled that plane up. Now I want this to be the distance from my stock to my face. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is pull that up, and this is actually going to be 1 millimeter up. And this is going to be where my stock is going to start. Now, the rectangle that you see here represents the work plane alone. And you'll see over here in the model browser that it's now a feature underneath that work tree. I can right-click on it and turn on and off the visibility so that I don't have to look at it. Now, if I hover over that, you can see that plane is still there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a 2D sketch. When I start a 2D sketch, it's going to ask me, what plane do I want to sketch on? Well, I just created that plane offset because that's where I want the Z to be for my sketch. I'm going to go ahead and click that plane over here in the model browser, and that puts us immediately into the sketch environment. Now, from a part environment, the sketch environment is based and made up of the same similar workflow pattern as our part 3D modeling environment. We can start a sketch, create entities, and in this case we have the line tool, the circle tool, the arc tool, and the rectangle tool here as the parent create features. We have extract geometry, which is what we would use if we wanted to use geometry from the model to create a sketch. The engraved text is a plugin. And then we have our modify panel, which again is move, copy, rotate, offset sketch, tools such as that. And what we're going to use here is we're going to go ahead and just create a simple rectangle. I'm going to create this rectangle as a center point rectangle. And what that does is it allows me to pick a point that I want to use as a center line. Now, I know that the center of this geometry is a certain distance from this point. So if I were to say just place this here and pull my rectangle out a close enough distance to create this stock body, then that is a guesstimate of where the center point is. Now, what has happened here when I have placed this is there are certain things that it automatically knows that it needed to do. And one of those things is that it created these perpendicular constraints and parallel constraints automatically to the rectangle feature. So I have a parallel constraint for each line that was created, a perpendicular constraint forcing it to stay equal to each sides of the rectangle, and then a horizontal or vertical constraint telling it that these lines are perfectly horizontal or vertical to the model plane itself. What isn't known here, and I'm just going to hit escape to get out of that, is where this rectangle is in my sketch in relevance to my part. So I'm going to use a constraint, and I'm going to use what's called a horizontal constraint, and I'm going to use that point to this point here. And you can see that that's actually the wrong constraint because I'm actually flipped from my XY. That's not a big deal. I can just hit Control Z and undo that. And I actually want to make this a vertical constraint. In the Y direction is my vertical plane at this point. So I'm going to grab the points. Now those two are constrained together. If I hit Escape, I can't pull in the X direction. I can only pull along the Y direction. So now what I can do is I can create a dimensional constraint to this point on this sketch, which is the home position for this part. And this will basically ground my rectangle a specific distance. Now, judging by the center point of this part, it looks like it's 21 millimeters even. Now, what you'll notice is that these dimensions have turned black, and if I click on the dimensions, I can double click on them and I can edit them, I can change them. There's a lot of things I can do. They've turned black because they are fully defined. The green sketch represents the color that right now I can move this entity in or out. And because of those constraint relationships here, it's going to maintain parametrically to each other. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is define my sketch based off of what I would purchase from a vendor. And I'm going to go ahead and hit dimension again. Click this. I'm going to go ahead and do 200 millimeter by, let's say, 130 millimeters for my sketch. Now what you'll notice is that I have an offset distance that's different here to my edge. So my part's not exactly center with this 21. So what I need to do is figure out the difference between these two arcs and then just subtract that from the 21 inches. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is quickly just pull up my calculator here. And we're going to do the 74.151 minus the 65.849. And we have the 8.302. Now we can take this, copy this information, close our calculator down, double click on our 21 millimeters, and subtract this number, Control V it, or rather add, wrong direction, add that number to it to kind of push or even out our number. And what I should have done was divided that in half. So instead of 8.302, it should be 4.151. And now that sketch has been centered onto my part. So now that rectangle is a sketch feature within this part. I can hit the Finish Sketch. You can see it doesn't look like much has changed, but I'm out of the sketch environment now. Now I can actually use that sketch to create solid geometry. So I am going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Extrude button. Now automatically, because it's the last sketch in my tree, Inventor is going forward with that and guessing that I want to use that sketch. Let's rotate around here and take a look at what we got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our window here, and this is our Extrude wizard. It gives us all of our options for our extrude, and the default option for most features is going to be to join them. What we're going to do is we're going to actually use this new solid body feature. And what that's going to do is add this as a separate solid in our tree, so we can use it as stock inside of the part separate from the part itself, which is a great feature to use, and it allows us to keep that stock within Inventor separate from the part file itself. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to just go ahead and use the pull tool and get my stock relatively close to where it's going to be, and I'm going to have probably roughly a quarter or roughly around 250 thousandths or so to hold on to in a vise. So I go ahead and make this 75 millimeters thick. Now what you'll see is I have two separate solid bodies in here, and what I can do is I can click on solid body number 4 and rename it to, say, stock. That way I know it's the stock, and what I can do inside of Inventor now is that I can actually turn this on and off as I need it. So I'm going to turn it invisible for now, and turn it visible when I need it. So that is one scenario to use as far as creating stock inside of a part environment, having this separate solid.